My Aunt Tammy has a collection of porcelain doll clowns. She always kept them neatly in an old wooden antique cabin with a glass display that housed 20 to 30 collected pieces. She has had them for as long as I can remember, so they never bothered me. My aunt only had one daughter, but she loved children and wanted her daughter to have kids her age around. So she would get all her nieces and nephews and have us spend the weekends there. My cousins and my parents welcomed the break and knew my aunt was great with kids. The only thing my mother ever opposed was just one thing: her scary stories. When we were young, she would retell her horror stories. She would gather us around in a circle as if we were camping, only in her large Victorian house, and around her fireplace instead of a campfire. She would stand in the middle as she recited tales that riveted and scared us all. Some from her childhood, others she would create on the spot that starred us all in roles. She was all of our favorite aunt for this reason. The less tolerant of my cousins would be too afraid and asked to be picked up by their parents. But I wasn't afraid of anything, or so I thought. One day, I was staying over my aunt's as a teenager in high school. Our visits weren't as often as they once were, but I still came over to watch new movies, especially horror flicks that my mother wouldn't allow at home. And this day, I was given permission to stay over at her place. By this time, her dining room had changed. Modern things such as a computer desk and gym equipment infected her room, making the old collection of dolls much more peculiar because of the juxtaposition. Though I was as familiar with her house, I couldn't help but look at the dolls differently. Though I have heard of some of my classmates having a phobia of clowns, I never had such a thought. People being afraid of clowns? They're harmless and fun. However, in hindsight, I hadn't seen the It movie. Anyways, I remember just how silly I thought this so-called phobia was. Clowns make you laugh, they don't make you scared. That night, I woke up suddenly, with a cold sweat and a terribly dry throat. I went downstairs to get a drink. I ventured down the steps and walked into one of their 2 dining rooms. This one being where they kept the porcelain dolls. As I walked by in the dark, everything was just so quiet, which was unusual for my normally loud family. They were all asleep, as it was already 4 a.m. at the time. I remember feeling this sense of unease permeate through the air. A strangely tense sense of dread whispered in the shadowy areas of the room. And before I made it to my destination, I swear I saw the shadows of the clowns move on the floor next to where my feet were. I quickly looked back at the antique cabinet. They were as still as statues. They had not moved an inch. Frightened to death, I quickly abandoned my plan of getting a drink and darted to the front room where my aunt was sleeping with her TV still on. The TV screen's haunting blue light flickered sporadically on my aunt's face, making me feel only more unsettled. At this point, I had the urge to use the washroom. I looked back through the traditional double-door opening to the house where the dolls were located. My only light is the one from the television. partially lighting the smiles of the clowns like lightning strikes in a dark field, illuminating their once benign faces to something much more sinister. I quickly walk past them, shielding my eyes as I make it to the hallway where the bathroom is located. I did my business and began thinking just how crazy I'm being. There's absolutely nothing there. It was all in my head. I began washing my hands when suddenly I hear a small voice giggle and say my name. I stood there in the bathroom, frozen, unable to move. What I can only describe as a shadow began crawling behind me. My senses began crashing back to me, and I quickly ran out of the bathroom, all the while the shadows seemingly darting closer and closer towards me, their movements more erratic than ever before. There was something after me. I make it into the front room, sweating profusely, and I put the covers over my head as if to shield myself from what felt like an attack. I spent the rest of the night on the oversized chair next to the love seat that my aunt slept on. In the morning, when light came in, it was as though the world shifted to normal again. When my aunt asked me why I decided to sleep downstairs instead of upstairs with my other cousins and siblings, I brushed it off as me merely missing her. My aunt, being a great cook, asked me if I wanted something to eat. I say yes, and all seems right in the world again. She begins to venture through the dining room with the dolls that leads to the kitchen. I almost allow myself to forget the previous night's strange activities, when suddenly she asks me, "James, did you move my clown dolls?" Confused, I rush to the dining room and I see the dolls' heads all turned the same way. What's even more strange is that they all seemed locked onto where I was sleeping behind the wall. I never told my aunt or anyone else about that night. I still, to this day, am not afraid of clowns. However, clown dolls are another story.